In February 1959, 9 of the most experienced hikers in the Soviet Union entered a mountain in the Ural region of Russia. They were found dead weeks later under circumstances so disturbing that the Soviet government immediately classified every single piece of evidence. The tent was ripped open from the inside. The bodies were scattered across miles of frozen wilderness. Some had injuries that should have been physically impossible. And the official cause of death in the government report was 4 words that have haunted investigators for 65 years. An unknown compelling force. Nobody has ever been charged. Nobody has ever confessed. And the full files remain classified to this day. What you are about to hear is everything they tried to hide. The 9 hikers were not tourists. They were not beginners. They were elite athletes and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, one of the most prestigious universities in the Soviet Union. Every single one of them had years of experience hiking in extreme winter conditions. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, already considered one of the finest and most respected mountain guides in the entire Ural region. The group included 7 men and 2 women. They had done trips like this many times before. They were prepared for everything, or so they thought. They set off from the city of Sverdlovsk on January 23, 1959. The mood was excellent. They were laughing, joking, taking photographs. One member of the group, Yuri Yudin, turned back after just a few days due to a joint illness. He hugged his friends goodbye. He watched them disappear into the snow. That was the last time anyone saw them alive. Yudin lived until 2013. He spent the rest of his life trying to understand what killed his friends. He never found the answer. The group's original destination was a mountain called Otorten, a challenging but manageable climb for experienced hikers like them. But on the night of February 1st, weather conditions deteriorated rapidly. Visibility dropped to almost zero. The group made a decision to stop and set up camp on the slope of a nearby mountain to wait out the storm. That mountain was called Kholat Syakhl. In the ancient Mansi language spoken by the indigenous people of that region, the name Kholat Syakhl has only one meaning: the mountain of the dead. Local Mansi people had avoided this mountain for generations. They warned outsiders never to camp on its slopes. The 9 hikers, trained Soviet scientists and athletes, dismissed these warnings as superstition. They set up their tent, they had dinner, they wrote in their diaries, and then something happened. Something that in 65 years, no government, no scientist, and no investigator has ever been able to fully explain. When the group failed to return on schedule, search and rescue teams were dispatched to the mountain. What they found at the campsite stopped them cold. And these were hardened Soviet military men who had seen everything. The tent was still standing, but it had been sliced open from the inside. Not torn by wind, not damaged by snow, deliberately cut open by someone using a knife, cutting outward from inside the tent. All 9 hikers had left through that cut opening and fled into minus 30-degree temperatures. They left behind their shoes, their coats, their food, their equipment, everything they needed to survive. Their footprints in the snow told a story that made no sense. For the first 100 meters, they had walked calmly, in a controlled, organized line. Then the footprints began to spread apart. Then they ran. 9 experienced, disciplined, trained adults ran barefoot into a deadly blizzard rather than spend one more second inside that tent. Whatever they saw, whatever they heard, whatever they experienced in those final moments inside, it terrified them more than certain death in the frozen darkness outside. The bodies were found over the following days and months, scattered across a wide area of the mountain. The first 2 were discovered at the edge of a forest, near the remains of a small fire. Their hands had been burned down to the bone. They had held their bare hands directly in the flames in a desperate attempt to generate any warmth at all. 3 more bodies were found on the slope between the forest and the tent, positioned as if they had tried to turn back and return to camp, but ran out of strength before they could make it. But the final 4 bodies, discovered 3 months later buried under 4 meters of snow in a steep ravine, were the ones that truly shook the investigators to their core. One had a fractured skull consistent with a severe blow to the head. 2 others had their chest cavities crushed, multiple ribs broken simultaneously, with the force of impact compared by the forensic examiner to a high-speed automobile collision. And one of the women was missing her tongue, her eyes, and her lips, removed completely. The forensic examiner who performed the autopsies filed an official report with this conclusion: the injuries could not have been caused by another human being. The force involved was simply not human. The physical injuries were disturbing enough, but the other evidence collected at the scene took this case into territory that Soviet investigators were completely unprepared for. Multiple items of clothing from the victims tested positive for radioactive contamination, specifically concentrated on areas that would cover the chest and abdomen. The skin of several victims had turned a dark, deep orange color that pathologists could not explain. Multiple victims had hair that had turned completely gray, not gradually, but all at once, overnight. And then there were the lights. Dozens of witnesses in villages across the region reported seeing large, glowing orange spheres moving silently through the sky on the exact night the hikers died. These were not isolated reports. Soviet military personnel at 3 separate installations filed official reports describing the same phenomenon that same evening. Within days of these reports being filed, every single one was classified. Every witness was told to stay silent, and the investigation into the lights was shut down before it ever began. In the 65 years since the deaths, researchers, investigators, and scientists from around the world have proposed over 75 different theories to explain what happened at Dyatlov Pass. The most widely discussed is a secret Soviet military experiment, a weapons test or rocket launch that went wrong, releasing radiation, creating the orange spheres in the sky, and causing injuries that the government then desperately needed to cover up. A second major theory focuses on infrasound, a natural acoustic phenomenon where wind passing over specific mountain ridge shapes creates sound frequencies below the threshold of human hearing. These frequencies are known to cause extreme psychological effects in humans, including irrational panic, paranoia, terror, and the overwhelming physical need to flee. A third theory involves the Mansi people and a confrontation on the mountain. But every single theory has the same problem. None of them, not one, can explain all of the evidence at the same time. The crushed ribs, the radiation, the missing tongue, the orange spheres, the gray hair, the calm footprints that became a panicked run. No single explanation covers all of it. In 2019, the Russian government officially reopened the Dyatlov Pass investigation for the first time in 60 years. After months of analysis, they announced their conclusion: an avalanche. Researchers who had dedicated their careers to this case rejected the conclusion immediately. There was no avalanche debris. The snow around the tent was undisturbed. The injuries did not match avalanche trauma. And the radiation that soaked into their clothing and concentrated over their vital organs, has never been explained by any natural event. The investigation was closed. The remaining classified sections of the file were not released. 9 people walked into that mountain on January 23, 1959. Whatever came back out was not something the Soviet government was willing to tell the world about. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week we go even deeper. Comment the number 1 to tell me you watched until the end.